Hi everyone, grab a seat. Yeah. Okay. So hi everyone. Can you hear me at the back, by the way? Ah, yeah, music. That's good. Oh, it's better. Okay, so hi. It's pretty amazing that there's so many people came for the first meetup. So thank you. Clap for yourself. What? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So and my beautiful hair, no? Yeah. So, yeah. So first of all, clap to yourself. Yeah, thank you for coming. So yeah, it's been I think when was the last meetup? I think over 2 years, maybe 3 years. So it's all rusty. So we'll see how it goes. So be patient. I first want to thank like the people who made this thing happen and possible. So first, Lively for hosting this, and since I came with like question people like what to do if it's possible, they were extremely supportive. They helped with everything, talks, the pizza, the food, the place, and everything. So thank you, Lively. Thank you very much. And also Robert and Dennis from React Amsterdam, which helped me also like take over the group. So thank you very much. And also the people that were here before that, the formal organizers, that I just asked them why there wasn't a meetup, and they just said, we don't know, and take it over. So they were very nice, and they just gave it over. So I'll thank them. By the way, I'm Uri. So the reason I'm here is because I moved to Amsterdam, I think a year ago or something like that. Before that, I worked at Apollo and Meteor, built all kinds of GraphQL stuff and stuff before that. Part of that, later I joined like a joint team between Facebook and Apollo, and I worked on the GraphQL subscriptions spec. It's like when you want to do real time with GraphQL. So I built that and built the libraries, the JavaScript implementation for it. And then I left Apollo and I started a group called the Guild, which were just like, we're a group of open source developers. You're probably using some of the libraries that we built, but you don't know that we're the ones who built them. Because the idea is that it's not under the Guild, it's under, every library is under a person's name. It's like an open source philosophy thing. I don't know if you heard about GraphQL-code-generator, GraphQL modules, GraphQL CLI, GraphQL config. There's much GraphQL inspector. Maybe just a second. Let's see if it works. You see this? No, this is the mountain. Just so I won't forget. But yeah, we don't even have a website yet. But wait, is this working? Yeah, so just a bunch of libraries across like the whole stack. I won't talk too much about us, don't worry, just so you see why I'm giving it up. And the merge GraphQL schema, GraphQL Toolkit, inspector, Sofa. I don't know if you heard about Sofa, but the idea is that you can write a GraphQL server and then just generate a REST server without writing any line of code. So all kinds of libraries like that that just make sense. So, but you probably just didn't know that it was us. So yeah. So that's us. And the thing is, we don't sell any product. Like that's kind of the reasons why I left Apollo as well. Everything is open source, everything is free, everything you can just take whatever you want. You don't need to take the whole stack or anything like that. And all we care is just promoting open source. We have like a different model of how we work. So also what we saw is that it's very hard. Mostly it's hard for people to learn. That's the thing, that companies always like ship a product. It's very cool at the beginning, and then 3 months later, they desert it, or it's like undocumented or stuff like that. So we do it slower. So we have this tutorial, for example. It's like a WhatsApp clone, and it's like a full app. And the best thing about this tutorial is that I created it because after you do a tutorial, 3 months later it doesn't work anymore because there's like React 16 now, and then it's like failing or something like that. So this thing, it's not only keeping up to date, but also every time we keep updated version of updated tutorial, you get a git diff of between the old version and the new version. So as a learner, you don't need to do another tutorial, another clone, or another thing. You just update your existing stuff, and just because it makes sense. And I don't know, I guess companies don't do that because they want to get you to be more time at their website or something. Yeah, so that's us, and we started doing recently workshops and stuff, so it's fun. Now I'll stop about myself, but I'm also the organizer of this group, and this is the first meetup. So my goal here today is not like we'll try to give you the best meetups possible, but also the main goal for me is just to hear from you. Like, there's a lot of people here. A lot of people are doing GraphQL already or are interested in GraphQL. And I think we can think together how we can make this meetup like the best as possible. Like, for sure, we will repeat it every 2 months or something like that. Not like there's not going to be one in a year from now, but like every 2 months at least. But how can we use it? A lot of the talks you can watch online, but maybe you can do more to just help the individuals here. So I'll just give my talk. First of all, I'll start with like a GraphQL intro, just because maybe not everyone here is experts. So just to give a bit of overview of what is GraphQL. I'll also talk a bit about like the ecosystem and like just I always feel like the talks about GraphQL are focusing about very specific use case for GraphQL, but I think GraphQL is so much more. So maybe I'll just cover some stuff around it. And then I think I'll talk a bit about possible things that we can do with the meetup. And then I'll talk about what we have today after me. There's 2 more talks, there's panel, and we can also talk with each other and stuff. So GraphQL is, you're all here because GraphQL is growing fast. But in my opinion, GraphQL is just starting. And it's mostly because people don't really still get what you can do with GraphQL. So I'll try to cover some of that. So GraphQL is a query language, right? Most of the people here probably know. You describe your data in a schema, then you can query for it. And you get exactly a predictable results with exactly what you expected, just what you expected, and in the types that you expected to get, which is very powerful, kind of like reminds us of SQL, for example. And the story that usually people hear about GraphQL is that we use it over the network. So we have a client and we have a server. Now, on the server, we describe, we have this, like, let's call it magical GraphQL box, or a GraphQL engine. And we just describe what we have in our data centers. Like, what data do we have? And we describe it in a schema. And then what the magical GraphQL box can help us to do is that the client can actually start querying, let's say, for a specific user and just the user's name. And then the magical box in the sky will just call some functions that we call resolvers, like very individual functions. And we'll gather the data that we want, and then we'll return just one response with exactly what we expected, which is cool. But then if we even expand that query and we also want the user's messages, and for each message we want the content, again, the client will just send one request to the magical GraphQL thing, and that magical thing will first fetch the user, then fetch the messages and the name in parallel, and then we'll get the content. And maybe the content will come from a third party, let's say a CMS or something. But then the client will get the exact one response with exactly what the client expects, and it's all over the network. So that's pretty cool. And what we gained was less data over the network and less requests over the network. And that's by itself really, really cool. And that's how, when first GraphQL was presented, that's what everyone was talking about. And still today, that's like the main message. But I must say that when I come to like companies, and I tell them that story, they're impressed, but not that impressed. But then what I found is like what companies really care about is less like the performance or stuff like that, but more faster development, and they want some order in their code, and they want to work with their existing infrastructure that they have without changing too much. They want to gradually get there. So, in my opinion, GraphQL brings us many more benefits that are much stronger than what I just showed. So, in order to understand that, let's dive deep a bit about how this magical engine works. So when we create the schema, what we actually do is we create functions. That's resolvers, if the ones who understand the language of GraphQL. And each resolver basically is a simple function, right? This is like the output, and this is so it's just a function. So we get a bunch of functions. Now, each of those functions gets a specific input, and it does some processing, like maybe calling a server or something like that, and then returns a specific output. So that's cool. So we can now basically split our data or our work into very specific cubes, very specific defined functions. And then what GraphQL does for us, for free, is it gets the query, build some kind of a return pattern of what it's supposed to get, and then it will start executing for us. So it will get the user ID 10, run the first box. Then, according to the result that we're going to get for the first box, GraphQL will bring the right boxes that we created before and run those two in parallel. One of the results will be just a scalar type, just a string. So it will put it already in the result. But then messages, we're actually getting a number of messages, and we want to get just some parts of those. So what we will do then is for each message, it will bring the right resolvers, we'll run all of those in parallel, and we'll put the results in the right place, and when it's done, we'll send the result back. Now, that's pretty cool, because today, all of this logic we do manually. Right? And that's, I think, where the strength of GraphQL comes. A lot of this work today we do with, if you're an Angular developer, you have all kinds of tools like RxJS, and if you're a React developer, you can use RxJS if you want, but you have all kinds of other tools. But at the end of the day, you write logic to create that. But here, just by describing a schema and a query, you don't write the logic. You just write the resolvers, and all the execution and the runtime and the orchestration of, maybe that will come later than that, and maybe this will take more time, and then maybe it's not in the right structure, so we need to iterate it and shape the results as we want, is gone. GraphQL can automatically do that for us. So we don't need to write that code anymore. So even though we saw at the beginning that GraphQL is distinct between the client and the server, I think we can do more with it. Maybe we can actually, where would we write this logic today that I just described? And if we're looking at an app, then today that app is actually fetching REST calls from the server, and then after the app fetched all the REST calls that it needed, then it does some logic on the client, and structure the code and puts it into the right component in the right rendering. So that's all that work is being done today manually on the client. So that means that we can actually use GraphQL not only between the server and the client, but maybe you can use it just on the client. You can take the same GraphQL engine and those same philosophies and just use it on the client. So this is, I'm not going to dive too much deep into here. I'm just giving you an overview of all the possible things that you can do with GraphQL and what are all the debates that are now happening in the community. It's more than just this thing that saves you requests. So if you do it on the client, again, you can have all this logic just automatically. So you will see that it will save a lot of code for you. And you can start calling it directly. You can call this, let's say you put it in your client, you can call it directly from your component. So then it means that you don't need to have a central place to basically have all the code that fetches data. Each component, this is by chance an Angular component, sorry, But but basically, if I want to change something in a component, I don't need to go change it here and then figure out where I broke something. I can just change it in one place, and this magical box will do the work for me. So, and that's how Facebook does components at scale. You just, they use Relay, and we'll talk a bit about it maybe, but you basically get the queries near the components. So those concepts of services and stuff like that, there's much less, are being automated for us. And then you can really scale, because you know that you changed something in a component, it didn't affect anyone else. This is very powerful. So again, you get organized code and you get automatic execution. And if you think that's like not enough, and the performance are the actually thing that matters, here is like a quote from PayPal. So PayPal started with PayPal now doing GraphQL basically everywhere. They just released like a new blog post about it, but they released an actual blog post like a year ago, saying that they just started from the client. And what they said there is, we have found that UI developers were spending less than a third of their time actually building UIs. The rest of the time spent figuring out where and how to fetch data, filtering, mapping over the data, and orchestrating many API calls. Yeah, everyone is nodding. Now building UI is a nice to have and an afterthought, right? So that's what we do, right? When we are UI developers, React or Angular or whatever, we don't really build UI. We're just like, I won't say the word, but we're just messing around with a lot of data. And GraphQL can help with that, can help a lot. So basically, if we want to make change, if we want to put GraphQL in an organization, we don't have to like, in some organization, if you're a startup, it's fine, but in some organizations, you can't just put a new node server in the middle of everything. You need to talk to architects, and you need to talk to POs, and you need to like, I don't know, do whatever. Here, you just put it in your own, just like another NPM package, like you installed Redux. But you got all those benefits. And you're already using GraphQL. So that's just like an area that I think is really growing right now. More and more people understand that you can use GraphQL just for the client, or also in the client. For a reference, I would really advise you to look at, like, there was, I think, ReactConf was last week, right? Something like that. And there was the talks there about GraphQL and Relay were fascinating, how they build a new Facebook.com. Whether you're an Angular developer or React developer or whatever, really worth seeing. The concepts are the important stuff there. Another thing in GraphQL that everyone is talking about is code generation, which, nobody likes to write code a lot. So yeah, we saw GraphQL already saves us a lot of code. But also we have already the types, right? When we write those resolvers, for example, we know what's going to get in, we know what's going to get out. Then, and then there's a function. So we write our logic here, but we know this and we know that. So why not just generate those typings for us, right? We can just generate this, so we don't need to write TypeScript. And that's, maybe, I don't think it's a sensitive subject anymore, TypeScript, but everyone is going on the TypeScript train. But if you want to start TypeScript, the easiest way to start writing TypeScript is not writing TypeScript. It's letting someone else generate it for you. So that's really cool. You can actually, if you do that, you can write here JavaScript, but if you use VS Code, you'll get autocomplete. Because, VS Code, you can write JavaScript that understands TypeScript. So another thing that and it's all concept, like, another thing that you can do, like, the schema and the query, so I know the types that's going to get. So I can generate TypeScript from my queries. I know what's going to come. So I can generate the TypeScript, but then I can also generate, anything else, like React hooks. I can basically get a fully typed component from React. I can just import it, and it's done. So yeah, so a lot of stuff you can generate, and it's just the start. Like, I'm here. This is Graphql-code-generator. This is like a tool that we wrote, but there's a lot of other code generators. You don't have to use ours. But also what we started generating since last week is we launched a new GraphQL CLI. What we do there is we take you just write your schema. I don't know if some of you remember GraphQL. Yeah? It was cool, right? So
it's out of production since last week.
What?
We removed it from production last week.
Good. Congratulations. So that's exactly the problem. What GraphQL was known about is you could just describe a schema like, where did I have a schema? Where is it? Yeah. So you can just describe this schema, and it basically generates like a whole backend for you, like a backend as a service, kind of like Firebase. So that was cool, but again, like you couldn't scale it, right? It was like it's a backend as a service. If you're getting to be a normal product, you're done. So what we did was we did the same, but open source. So with the new GraphQL CLI license last week, you can put this in. It will generate a fully functioning backend for you. But that backend is how you would actually write your own backend, and then you can stop generating and just write your own code. So you can get, in 2 minutes you can get a working server, but that server you can keep working on it. You don't need to it's not a backend as a service anymore. It's open source, and you can generate it in TypeScript, in the JavaScript, in Java, .NET, whatever. And you can also generate the front end, but yeah, you can read about it later. Yeah, another thing that that there's a big debate about, and now there's more and more things, is the client side. Everything we talked about till today, we ran this engine, but basically everyone, when they use Apollo and Apollo client. Why? Because that's why they push a lot of marketing. But there's a real reason for using Apollo client or Relay. Because what we get here over the network is types, we can actually have here a store, kind of like Redux. But unlike Redux, which is just a big blob of information, which is nice to handle when you're like a small startup, but then when your app gets bigger, it gets messy, we know types, so this can actually become like a database. So if, this component, this is supposed to be component, but sorry about that. But let's say this is a component, and they share the same data, and you update one of them, the other one will update. Right? So they all keep watching the same local database. So that also saves a lot of work. So it's another area that everyone is talking about. Another thing that I want to expand a lot is like all kinds of, like the N+1 problem. How do I get a query, and then it's going to call tons of requests for the server. How do I mitigate it? So one nice thing to have is data loader. It's like a pattern. What it actually does is, I know those two types are the same. So I'm kind of like, I'm faking it. I'm telling GraphQL that you're actually calling this twice, the server, but actually what it does, I'm aggregating those messages and sending one request with all the bunch of IDs that I wanted, just one request to the server, and then I'm bringing it back to the client. There's another talk today from Lively that will get much more into those details, but this is one thing to know about data loader. Another thing is that we can actually use the query itself. Like I said, it's very similar to SQL. So I can take the query and convert it to SQL, or convert it into a Mongo query. So then I can just query what I want also from the server. Another area that's happening in the community. I'll skip those things. Another big area that everyone is talking about. By the way, all those things, I'm just trying, there's like 40 slides between the slides that I'm showing you. I'm just giving you an overview, and you can talk to me later. We can talk about having more talks, what will be the next talks in the next meetup. We can have we will have a panel here so you can ask. So it's just like a big overview. Another big area that everyone is talking about today is the idea of one graph. And we have, what is GraphQL? It's a schema that can call many, many different data sources and aggregate everything, right? So does it mean that we can now have this one big GraphQL server that serves all of our hundreds of microservices in the company? If so, how do we manage it? Like, do we split it? Like each product has its own microservice or its own GraphQL engine? Or we merge it somehow, but then if we have everything together, it gets messy. there's big discussions about it, right? Like, how do I split GraphQL? If I have a huge GraphQL code base, how do I split it? Like, how do I split the schema, split the resolvers, split the business logic and services? There's a lot of discussion here, and I think it's worth talking about it as a community because I feel personally, I have a whole talk about it, but that currently there's a lot of misconceptions about it. A lot of companies are pushing for solutions and saying that that's the way to go. I would say just as a note, without giving a whole talk about it, start simple and expand only when you need. But I won't expand it too much. Maybe in the QA later. Maybe you know what I'm hinting about. But then I think the last subject, or one of the two last subjects that I'll just mention is we have GraphQL, and that's just exposes data for the front end. And like we said, if we start from the client, it's basically what we're creating here is a schema that is for the product. It's a product-facing schema. How does all the existing backend services are being handled by? Like, what's happening to them? Do they actually change? Like, the whole idea of GraphQL at the beginning was like, we can put it here without even talking to them. We can query them like they don't even know and get a much better experience on the client. But let's say we've been through that process already. Now we have this set up. All of our clients are moving fast. We use GraphQL everywhere. Everyone is happy. Can we even simplify things here? And I think there's a lot of opportunities here, actually on the backend side. Because today the backends are kind of in a weird place. The backends that we today call what is a backend? Like many times when you go to a company and you ask, what is a backend? They say, okay, yeah, we expose REST APIs, but it's a question: are you exposing APIs that are completely generic because you're doing a microservice architecture or whatever, or you're actually doing something that is specific for a product, right? Like you expose something that is the best for the product that you do. And I think, I think here what we found is that there is a schema of all the microservices. Like if we take all the microservices and we turn them into a schema, what we found, this is contradictory to a lot of what people and companies say. That's not the schema that we expose to the client. Whoa. Sorry. Yeah, I said something wrong. Yeah.
No, you did.
Oh, yeah.
No pizza next time.
Yeah. Right.
GraphQL is not ready for this much.
Yes. Oh, okay. Fine. So this is yeah, it's good. Yeah. Okay, I won't touch too much on this point, but just to give the note or the general idea that GraphQL maybe is not the best technology. Maybe it is. There is a big debate, and we're trying to also think about it. From service-to-service communication. From service-to-service communication, there's much more considerations to do. And ask yourself some questions before you turn all your backend services into GraphQL instead of gRPC or REST. There's some considerations there. There's complexity there. Okay, last thing. Let's say you are using, you got everything in GraphQL, you expose everything, all your clients using GraphQL and everything. But there's still third-party partners or maybe a really annoying team that says GraphQL is shit and we don't want to use it. It's just a hype. Then that's not a problem because, in my opinion, GraphQL is a superset of REST. Right? You can do everything you can do with REST, just more. So just to prove it, we created a library that actually takes GraphQL schema and generates a complete RESTful API with one line of code. So this is one library that kind of breaks, we did it in order to break the discussion of like REST versus GraphQL, just to show that it's just a query this from that. You can do the other way around as well. IBM has a library for the other way around. But you can do the same for any other protocol. Think about gRPC, think about Thrift or other stuff. And when you break this concept, then suddenly you can maybe put GraphQL here, but in a different way than what people are now telling you. So, yeah. Oh, and the last thing, sorry. Last thing, another subject. I'm just throwing subjects at you because it's just all the possible things we can talk about in the meetup, in this meetup, and the next is real time. You know, everything we talked about now is the client actually pushes for ask something. But maybe we actually want to push something for the client. And this is an area that's very dear to my heart because I worked on it, on the spec itself. But the idea is that we can expose with GraphQL subscription, there's many types of real-time stuff. But we can expose real-time events from the server to the client. And we can say, for example, message added. This is an event. Now, the good thing about this real-time event is that message added, we don't need a real-time database. We don't need Firebase or Meteor or whatever sophisticated thing in order to expose real-time. We just need to know when a message added, which we can do on the oldest infrastructure possible. So then what we can do with GraphQL is that this event is, when this event is being fired, it actually runs that query. So now, even if this event doesn't hold any information at all or just a little bit of information, GraphQL will get that query, will get that event, will enhance all the information that the client needed, and now we'll push even from a third-party API or a very old database, and then we'll send the results to the client with all the information that the client wants. That's very, very powerful, mostly because you can put it on any infrastructure. We put it on mainframes. Really. So that's a very, very powerful concept. You can even fire it from, like, I don't know, an IoT device and then fire the request again. So you can start thinking about, oh, I can actually do real-time stuff in my applications thanks to GraphQL. So now for the GraphQL Amsterdam. So there's a lot of people here. It's pretty exciting. And I thought a bit about, you know, we all do GraphQL, or maybe some of us do GraphQL, and I just think that what's the point of like coming here and meet? Like, you know, all the stuff are online, you know, like what's the idea about it? Why did we all come here? And I think, you know, having a group of having some people we can talk to about what we do or what we wish to do, and having those people that are different from the people that we see every day in our company, I think it's valuable. And I think what I want your help with is to figure out how we can help each person here to get something from this group that is not possible by just watching YouTube videos. And I gave some ideas for myself, but we'll do like a discussion, and you know, I want you to give ideas and think how, you know, what we can actually do. I just thought that, you know, what I see a lot in companies is companies just don't have any, you know, they tell you, oh, you're welcome. Do you know React? No. Do you know GraphQL? No. Okay, sit here and here is your task. And companies sometimes don't invest in like really getting the broader perspective of what people are doing and you know, building each other. And I think here we can build maybe some kind of guides or some kind of path for people to grow. That will be nice. Also, you know, we do a lot of open source, and I know a lot of people want to get into open source, but it feels scary. It feels like, you know, you put something out there and the whole world will see it, which is not the case. So we can help you with that, for example. Like just help you how to get in, where to get started, and just support you with the shitty stuff there. And I thought we can even create like, you know, working groups that are smaller here. Like let's say there's, you know, a representative from each company that are like, you know, big enterprise companies, and how do, you know, share ideas there, and I don't know, other stuff. Basically getting your ideas. So think about it, and maybe in the panel later we'll talk about it more. So, okay, that's enough for me. Sorry for taking so much time. After me, there's a break, I think, and then there's 2 great talks from KLM and Lively, really interesting ones, and they will actually talk practical things, so that will be good. And then we'll do like a Q&A and just a panel with all the speakers, and you can ask anything you want from the talks or on anything else. Just I think it will be cool to just have an open discussion about everything. So yeah, so just I don't know. It's back. We're starting. I hope it will be good, and I hope to get the feedback from you to make it the best and spread the word. Thank you. How many time? We'll do break? I think there's a break now, or you want to go immediately? Ur, okay. Come now, yeah. So first, Ugur from KLM, and then we'll do a break.